Hello, and welcome to Tarot Closet Reflections, where we discuss spirituality and tarot for the low key and undercover. I am your host, Hawthorne. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another podcast. So, for this month, I'm so excited. I have come up with a theme for this month, and I am calling this month Into the Shadow. And this is going to be as a means to get into the spirit of the season. I wanted to dive into my experience with shadow work, and as well as talk about some spooky spiritual topics. So if you like shadow work, talking about shadow work, what even is it? Origins of the ouija board, ancestor, veneration, ghosts, origins of holidays like Halloween, Dios los Muertos, and All Saints Day, as well as Samhain. Definitely stay tuned this month. I'm challenging myself, and I am trusting you to keep me accountable with getting 2 recordings up every week in October. Like I said, if any of these things interest you, please stay tuned. Now, for today, our discussion is going to be about shadow work. Where did this term shadow work or shadow self come from? If you have been in the witchy sphere for any amount of time, you'll eventually hear people talking about their shadow self and doing shadow work. The term shadow originated with Carl Jung, who is a famous psychologist. If you haven't heard about him, where have you been? But anyways, the shadow or id is an archetype that refers to an unconscious aspect of the personality which the conscious ego does not identify in itself, or in general your entire unconsciousness, i.e. everything which a person is not fully conscious or aware of. Basically, the shadow is the unknown side, the dark side. Because you often, I often, everybody often tends to reject or push aside, remain ignorant to the least desirable aspects of themselves. Even positive aspects of yourself can end up in your shadow. Just because, for whatever reason, society, the way your parents brought you up, combinations of people and things and experiences that have shaped us as people have shown us and proved to us that maybe this aspect of yourself isn't so great. So, Jung believes that this is something that is especially evident with people who suffer with low self-esteem, anxiety, and just general false beliefs. According to Jung, everyone carries a shadow, and the less it is embodied in an individual's conscious life, the blacker and denser it is. So, again, what is the shadow exactly? The shadow is, as I mentioned, the things about yourself, not that you just don't like, but the things that you've kind of pushed aside that you might not even be aware of. And when your shadow is shunned, it tends to undermine and sabotage your life. This can show up in addictions, low self-esteem, mental illness, chronic illness, and all other type of various ways. When your shadow is suppressed or repressed in the unconscious long enough, some psychologists believe that it can eventually overtake your entire lives and cause psychosis or extreme forms of behavior that your typical self wouldn't do otherwise. So, I mean, I'm sure we have all experienced this sort of phenomenon where you are in a particular situation and maybe somebody says something, makes a comment, or does something, and for whatever reason, you just kind of snap without thinking about it. You may say something kind of rude to that person that you normally wouldn't have otherwise, or you may do something, like lash out at them or something that you normally wouldn't do otherwise, and you think to yourself, well, oh my gosh, like, where did that come from? Like, I never would have said that. I normally don't ever do those things. Like, what the heck? That is your shadow showing itself and peeking through, and whatever about that situation triggered your shadow to respond in such a way. And so you may be thinking, why would you ever want to dive into shadow work? Shadow work is tough stuff. I'm just going to put that out there. It is tough stuff. I'm not an expert in this. I think we can all agree, okay? So that way I can stop having to throw this disclaimer out there in all of my podcasts. I think we can all agree that Hawthorne is not an expert, okay? I'm not an expert. I am not a teacher. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a psychologist. I am not a medical professional of any kind at all. I just use this platform to share my experiences and share the information that I have gathered, because I don't have very many other people in my life that I can share this with, okay? So that's out there. I can stop saying it now. I'm not a professional. Anyways, shadow work. It's tough stuff. It's difficult because you are looking at dissecting areas and aspects of your life that you have been conditioned and taught to repress, and that you don't find a lot of times desirable. And looking at those aspects and tracing it all the way back to where it came from. I like this example that Kellyanne Maddox used. Doing shadow work is a lot like the evidence board in the detective TV dramas, where it's got all the different pictures and pieces of evidence all on this cork board, laid out, times, dates, names. And then you see the detective, he takes a string and he goes, okay, well, Joe Schmo was here on Tuesday the 27th. And he takes a string and connects it with the pin from Joe Schmo's picture to the place Tuesday the 27th. And then he goes to the next piece of evidence and connects a string to that, and to that, and to that, and to that, and to that. And then at the end of it, you step back and you look and you just see like this huge jumbo web of connections. That's what shadow work basically is. To me, that can't be a more better representation of how it feels. So shadow work is tough stuff. Why would you want to do it then? Why would you want to sit through and look at the muck that you put in your unconscious for one reason or another? Well, understanding and figuring out your shadow can help you grow just in general as a person. Whether you're witchy, spiritual, or not, whatever, it can just help you grow as a person. Because, as the saying goes, you cannot have light without the darkness. If you are trying to embrace love, light, positivity, that's great. But eventually at some point you need to address the darkness that is within you. And just because it's dark doesn't always mean that it's scary. Can it be difficult? Yeah. But it's not always as scary as you may think. And then once you fully understand and realize what lies in your shadow, or you get a better glimpse, because I'm still working through mine, definitely. Shadow work is a lifelong journey, not continuous, because I don't think anyone should devote strenuous large amounts of time to shadow work, because that can just be problematic in general. But it's a continual journey, and going into your shadow and looking at and uncovering what makes your unconscious, what lies underneath there, what events and life lessons have made up who you are. I feel like you can better embrace, you can better love yourself as a person. So, how do you know this is something you are completely ready for? The thing is, I feel like you can never be truly ready to do shadow work. I feel like you do need to already have an appreciation, an understanding for self-love, for yourself, and what that looks like. However, I don't think you can ever really be fully ready. And I think one thing you have to remember when doing shadow work, you are not doing this to beat yourself up. You are not, if you're coming to shadow work because your initial thought is, okay, there's something bad about me, there's something wrong about me, and I need to fix it. And if that's your only thought, or if that is your only goal, is trying to fix you because you feel that you are inherently wrong and have a problem, then maybe you need to work on something else. Maybe you need to work on, self-love and embracing who you are first before you dive into something like shadow work. If that makes sense. So, now that we've kind of talked about where the term shadow work has come from, why I think people should start doing shadow work, and how do you know that you're ready, what I guess are some methods, some ways that I have done shadow work, and I guess I'll kind of talk about my story into shadow work. So like basically my whole start with shadow work, I guess for the past year, almost 2 years, I have been doing shadow work without necessarily realizing that's what I've been doing. I, like a year or two ago, I was in Texas, and I was like mentally not in a really good place, kind of in a low place, to be honest. And I just remember, thinking, why do I feel this way? Why do I keep having these same reoccurring issues, these same reoccurring problems, and how can I learn from it? I had started noticing that there were these repeat lessons and patterns that kept popping up in my life. And it felt like, when you're playing video games, I like video games, so hopefully this analogy relates to you. But you're playing video games and you're on that certain level. You've been playing the same level for the past 2-3 weeks because for whatever reason you just can't beat this boss. You got Link, you have all your hearts maxed out, you have the sword, you have the shield, you have the bottles and the different potions, and it seems like no matter how many potions, how strong your armor is, how many different attack combinations you use, for whatever reason, you just can't get past this certain boss, this certain level, and you always seem to die right in the same spot every time, and then you restart the game basically from the beginning of that level, and you just keep going in a continual loop, and you've been doing that for the past week. So in some ways, in some areas, aspects of my life, I kind of noticed the same reoccurring problems or same reoccurring issues, and I was at a point in my life where I was just trying to figure out, what is the lesson that I'm missing? Why do I keep repeating similar situations? Where does my particular response to these situations, where does that come from? And basically trying to figure out, how did I get here and how can I move on? And so it first started in response to my relationships, with dating and stuff. And I had noticed that some of these same issues and topics kept kind of coming up when it came to my dating life and relationships and all that kind of stuff. And so basically I honestly just started asking myself the tough questions, thinking back to my childhood, where these certain characteristics have shown up previously in my life. And that is why I think when it comes to doing shadow work, keeping a journal is so important. It is so helpful. Keeping a journal is helpful. Now, I say that, but at the same time, I'm also really horrible at keeping a journal. I'll do good for a while, write, answer prompts, whatever, and then she'll end up being forgotten somewhere or stashed away on my bookshelf, and then I don't write in it for months, and then I rediscover my journal. But I just think in general, especially if you're type of person where writing helps you, sitting down with questions and just writing your response, writing it out, seeing it on paper. If you draw it out some kind of way, getting it out of your head and into the physical world. So then that way you can, in a sense, detach yourself from it, and you can look at these aspects and areas in your life more objectively. Because like I said, the goal and the purpose of shadow work isn't to beat yourself up, isn't to, pull out all this stuff and look at how bad you are. Light and darkness, one is not inherently good and one is not inherently bad, even though society tries to tell us otherwise. They just are. It just is. And you, regardless of what it is, I think it is helpful and it is best and most healing for you to just embrace what it is and try not to judge, I guess, the quality of whatever it is you're struggling with. So journaling, definitely a good tool to have. Actually, for me too, getting into tarot, learning, reading, and understanding tarot for myself has been very helpful. I don't know if you've heard of the book, but Tarot for Yourself is a really good book. If you are looking into Tarot for Yourself by Morgan Greer is a really good book if you are looking into doing kind of shadow work exercises with the tarot. I mean, her book isn't necessarily marketed that way, but there are a lot of good questions in there that really get you to think about your subconscious and, look at perhaps the darker aspects of your personality and where those things might have come from. Also, another book that I kind of recommend for shadow work is Spirited, and I talked about that book in a previous podcast. But Spirited by Rebecca Rosen is a really good one because for her, and what I'm starting to notice, because I am still working through this book, not working through as in reading, but actually doing the exercises, if that makes sense. But I'm still working through this book, and she notes that doing shadow work has helped her become more connected with spirit. So with, the universe, with God. Looking at the shadow aspects of herself has helped her open up her heart and her mind to receiving messages from God, the universe, and even, in her cases, from past loved ones. She believes she is a medium, and she can talk to past loved ones, and she says really digging into the root causes of some of the problems and issues that she's noticed in her life. Well, I don't want to say problems, but I guess the struggles, the challenges in her life has really helped her open up that area and that aspect of herself and her life. And then lastly, I also want to point out Tarot Elements. And Tarot Elements is written by Melissa Sonova. She wrote The Kitchen Table Tarot, and Tarot Elements is a book where she kind of developed self-help spreads to help herself and her clients get to a better understanding of the self and what they need or what they want. And she basically uses the tarot to help discover that. And I believe personally the tarot is a great tool for shadow work, for any self-discovery. For me and a lot of other people who use the tarot, read the tarot for themselves, it is very much like a mirror. It is like a mirror, and the tarot is a great way, like I mentioned, to get what is in the subconscious, to get what is in your subconscious and make it physical and put it into archetypes that you can easily identify and better understand. It very much, in a way, allows at least me to remove me from the situation, if that makes sense. Because sometimes when you're doing shadow work, when you're doing any sort of personal growth work, it can be very difficult to remove yourself, your identity from your situation. And I think to a certain extent, it is important that we remember to distance ourselves from our situation. Because, like I said before, if we remain too attached and hold on too tightly to our ideal self and how opposite this aspect that you've discovered in your shadow self. Maybe your ideal self is that you believe that you're a truly honest person. You speak the truth and you believe the truth and you try to speak the truth at all times. However, during your shadow work, during your reflections, you realize that while you speak the truth, perhaps it isn't the whole truth. You know what I'm saying? Perhaps there is a little bit of lying, exaggeration within that truth. And for you as a person, it can be so easy for you to kind of deny that area. The fact that perhaps you aren't as truthful as you should be, it's so easy for you to deny that fact when you hold on too tightly to your ideal self. So, I gave you some resources, some tools. Journaling and tarot definitely helped me. YouTube channel, check out Kelly Ann Maddox. She has some really great videos going in depth on shadow work, and she even offers like specific counseling for dealing with shadow work if that's something you are interested in. And yeah, I'm trying to think if there's anything else I've missed. So yeah, I think that is basically it for today. I had notes, but I kind of went off track, didn't follow my notes completely, so I'm hoping that I covered everything that I wanted to cover in this initial podcast, kind of generally about shadow work and what it is and some of the tools that have helped me. If you have found this podcast helpful at all in any way, please make sure to like it. If you are listening on Anchor or where else? Google, or I think my podcast is now on iTunes. If you are listening on any of those platforms where it allows you to rate it, don't forget to give me 5 stars, because it really helps this podcast. It allows Google and all those other fun algorithm people to know that, hey, maybe we should share this podcast with more people and make it more visible, because I want to be able to reach anyone and everyone that I can. Like I said, unfortunately, in my current life situation, I cannot or don't have as much freedom or liberty to talk about these topics, and I just want to grow my little community here and create a safe space for those who might be in a similar situation to talk and chat and feel comfortable with learning and sharing and growing on their spiritual path and journey, no matter what that looks like. And so yeah, if you like it, if you share it, I really appreciate it, and I don't take it lightly at all whatsoever. And like I mentioned, I hope that you'll stay tuned for the whole month of October. 2 podcasts a week, y'all. I'm really trying, okay, to get better at this thing. 2 podcasts a week about shadow work, about spooky, spoopy things, to try and embrace the spooky season, the magical season, embrace the darkness that is coming upon us. And I hope that you have a wonderful, magical rest of your day. Bye, guys. Once again, I'd like to thank you for joining me on Tarot Closet Reflections. If you have any questions or would like to connect with me further, you can look for me on Instagram at tarot_closet_reflections. There I'll often post my daily tarot draws as well as other topics related to tarot and spirituality. I'd love it if you'd connect with me and comment down below. Share with me any ideas or tips that you might have to better this podcast. As with anything, I hope that this podcast will spark some discussion, perhaps answer any questions or give you useful advice in your own spirituality or tarot practice. As with anything, take what resonates and leave the rest behind. I am your host, Hawthorne. Have a wonderful day or evening.